Talked about Dr. Dan Poulter, who I watched being interviewed yesterday morning on the BBC, who was banging on about how the Tories had destroyed the NHS and that's why he's had to leave and join Labour. Well, I'm told he was a health minister for 4 years, so presumably he was helping to destroy the NHS while he was doing that.
Yes, and then he decided not to be and went on and gave some of his time, 25 hours a week. I spoke to one of his constituents, actually, yesterday. He told me that she was very annoyed that he had spent so long working in the NHS. Some people would say that kept him connected with his constituents, with people, but actually this constituent was particularly annoyed that he wasn't working as an MP at the time. But listen, Dan Poulter, not exactly the world's most high-profile MP, not good for Rishi Sunak, good for Keir Starmer, but at the end of the day, it's essentially man you've never heard of resigns from a job you didn't really know he had. Absolutely right.
Yeah, I was quite amused at the Keir Starmer kind of axis over the weekend, because there was a picture put out yesterday, I don't know if we've got it, of Keir Starmer and David Lammy at the North London derby between Arsenal and Tottenham, because of course famously Keir Starmer's an Arsenal fan, David Lammy's a Tottenham fan. But I also saw a picture of David Lammy over in America meeting Jacinda Ardern, you know, the woman who used to say, no, don't talk to your neighbours, seeing her on some kind of climate summit, for which he obviously flew to get there.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, St Jacinda re-emerging there. She's obviously stepped down as Prime Minister of New Zealand after locking down everybody in New Zealand for such a long time, not allowing anybody in and so on. Right. Unsurprising that David Lammy, who for some reason, Mike, doesn't seem to do interviews with Talk. Can't understand why that is. But he is someone who, of course, wants to hear her advice in terms of what to do in government.
Yes, very, very strange indeed. Let's talk about what's going on in Ireland. You obviously are a great expert on the difference between the legislatures in the Republic and in Northern Ireland. I'm not. We spoke to Kate Hoey a little bit earlier on. She's not entirely certain that they can pass any kind of emergency laws. But even if they do, it might help Britain more than it helps them.
Yes, I think this does actually help Rishi Sunak, because it shows that there is some sense of a deterrent that asylum seekers are going to Ireland because they apparently fear, some of them anyway, being sent to Rwanda. So 80% of the arrivals in Ireland of migrants appear to be via Northern Ireland, and the part of the point of Brexit, but really this actually dates back to 1920, to the 1920s, I should say, when Ireland became an independent country. This is all to do with a thing called the Common Travel Area. Right. You can go from the UK, including Northern Ireland, of course, to Ireland without a passport. So I have frequently flown to Dublin, for example, from London without a passport because of that common travel area. And some migrants are doing exactly the same thing because they know that Ireland is a different country, and a whole row about whether they can be sent back to the UK. And even if they are sent back to the UK, well, surely they can just come back through that open border from Northern Ireland, between Northern Ireland and the Republic.
So does that mean they can actually get on a plane without showing any kind of ID whatsoever?
Well, you've probably got to have some form of ID, like a driving licence or something like that, but you certainly don't need a passport. You certainly don't need to choose your nationality. I mean, if you are sitting in anywhere in the United Kingdom, you want to go and live and work in Ireland, if you're of any, as long as you're legally, well, perhaps even not legally here, as long as you're here in the UK, you can do that. And that is part of the
this is one of the things, I mean, I was proposing as a possible solution for the government to save themselves a load of money. Forget about millions and millions per passenger on a plane to Rwanda. I've checked, as you would expect me to do, my full and very well upholstered research department here at Morning Glory has checked that it's 130 quid for 4 people in a car to travel on the ferry from Stranraer to Belfast. I'm saying if we can get enough people onto one ferry, fill it up, they can all sort of meander their way down through into the Republic, and that could cause a very interesting problem for the Irish government.
Well, it's a fascinating problem, not just for the Irish government. You're absolutely right. It's a big problem for them, and Ireland's having a conversation about immigration that it hasn't previously. Perhaps I would respectfully suggest, after a little bit of sneering at us in terms of our situation with migration and sort of saying, oh, can't you just accept all these migrants? Well, no, actually, there are major pressures in public services. But it's interesting from the EU perspective as well, because essentially if Ireland passes this legislation, it's saying, well, we're sending people back to the UK or something's happening there. Whereas we, of course, have been told consistently that we cannot send migrants back to France. Right. Well, France and Ireland are in the EU, so the rules should, in theory, be the same. It's a fascinating and very difficult argument for Ireland, for France, and for the EU itself. But this whole principle of returning and processing in a third country, guess who's looking at that at the moment? Well, the European People's Party. Who's in the European People's Party in Europe? Ursula von der Leyen, the head of the European Commission. So it's a fascinating, multifaceted, and some would say hypocrisy-filled argument from the EU.
Yeah, well, there's a funny thing. Peter, great to see you again.